Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I have been waiting years to have my guest on the podcast. I have read all of her books. If you are my client or have done any work with me, you've probably heard me recommend any of her books. Codependency for Dummies was kind of her starter book. Mm-hmm. And then Codependency or Conquering Shame and Codependency. And then her latest book, Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist. So if you've worked with me at all or listened to this podcast, I have mentioned Darlene's books many times. They are filled with so many wisdom pieces on identifying codependency, working through shame. And if you've been married or dated a narcissist, this Darlene speaks into all of that. So Darlene, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to get to know you and talk about this subject, which is not focused on enough, I think. I wrote an article for Social Work magazine years ago saying shame is the elephant in the room. And if a therapist isn't aware of their own shame, they won't be able to help you with it because they will gloss over it or change the subject or, overlook a lot of signs. And once I started writing the book on shame, when I was asked by Hazelton to do that around 2014, I think, I started seeing all the signs with my clients much more quickly, and their progress and healing improved exponentially. Everything speeded up because we were getting to the core issue, because it underlines just about all the symptoms of codependency. And in my book, Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You, I think it's chapter 6, it says, shame is love's silent killer. I actually wanted that for the title, but I had other ideas, but it does, because most of the conflicts and problems that couples experience, especially that has to do with intimacy and closeness and unavailability and fear of intimacy, all that stems from shame.
I 100% agree. And that's why your work has really spoken volumes to me as a therapist and also with clients, because I don't think you get out of this life without having some shame. Would that be an overstatement to say? Like, do we all?
Oh, no. I mean, first of all, everybody has it because it's an emotion, just like sadness and anger. And it's just not talked about much in the US and Europe, because in Western cultures, children are socialized, and not just children, but the whole social system is more based on guilt, innocence and guilt. And the church and religion will emphasize that. But then you go to the Middle East, Latin America, Russia, Eastern Asia, their societies are considered collectivist societies, and shame is used to mold behavior. So they will outcast you. I had a client from Russia, and she did something that they didn't approve of, and they put a big poster up in the school to shame her. I have clients from Mexico where the student didn't do well on a test, and she was asked to come up in front of the classroom so the whole class could humiliate and shame her. It's terrible. And of course, it's documented that there have been a lot of suicides in South Korea, where students didn't get accepted into the college, and it was considered a shame on their family. So those are just some examples, but it's used intentionally, where in the West it's more guilt, and you've sinned, or you could. So actually, I found out that guilt is healthy in my research, and I learned to distinguish guilt from shame. So let's talk about that. So
Let's
yeah,
dive in.
is when you do something, usually it's moral. So like you can think it's sinful, or it's just wrong, it doesn't meet your standards, or you're immoral or something. So, but it's an act that you've done. And because it's an action, you can correct your behavior. You can make amends. It encourages you to reach out. It encourages you to reform and to change. And the point is you're redeemable. You can change your behavior and it produces growth. In contrast, shame is about you. You not only did something wrong, you did it because you're a fool, you're stupid, you're, just a jerk. You're a shame on the family. So it's you that's the problem. And then you feel irredeemable. So instead of wanting to reform and improve yourself, you want to withdraw. Shame makes you want to hide. Do you ever have that feeling like, I just want to disappear, wish I could disappear in the floor, melt away? That's shame. And it's one of the most profoundly painful feelings, because in those moments, you're not only alienated from other people, you feel like an outcast, or you're the only one. You're also alienated from any good traits that you have. You think that you're, there's nothing, you have no worth. You're worthless, you're inferior, you're inadequate.
Yes.
So some people will focus on maybe they don't think that they're pretty enough, smart enough, strong enough, virile enough, educated enough, rich enough to have all these things. But some people focus on one thing, but it all goes back to the core feeling that I don't have value. Who I am is not valuable. So, and you could translate that to feeling unlovable. I'm not worthy of being liked, esteemed, loved. You could plug in different words. People won't date me, they won't like me. But underneath that is the feeling of being unwanted and unlovable.
Yeah, it's deep. I mean, it's deep that it permeates every area of your life, especially in romantic relationships or other relationships. How does it tie into codependency? How do those two go hand in hand?
Well, it's chicken or the egg, which comes first. I think so I write in my book, they co-emerge, because I can't really figure it out. Codependency is learned behavior. It's transgenerational. If your parents have shame and codependency, despite their best efforts, they're going to pass it on, unless they've already done some trauma work. And by then they probably had a couple kids. So, but it starts early. And they've done research with toddlers and infants and mothers. And even though they knew the camera was on them while they were being watched, filmed, they did behavior that was abandoning to that child or not comforting. So, for instance, a baby is left in the room alone crying, and the mother walks in, and some mothers go and pick up their baby and comfort it. That would be a healthy response. Other mothers go in and they talk to the child, or some pick up the baby and then put it down, or they walk forward and then they step away. All this is unconscious behavior, and it has to do with the way that they were raised and treated and how they feel about themselves. I'll confess, I was a very young mother and I had a colicky baby. I didn't know that was the problem. Nobody told me. And my child would cry all the time as an infant. And I took it personally. I thought, oh, he doesn't love me. What am I doing wrong? It's all my fault. And that was just from my own lack of confidence and self-worth. So there's a saying, a famous analyst, Klein, said that your baby has to be able to bite the nipple, bite the breast. That means a parent has to have strong enough self-esteem so that they can tolerate rejection. Because toddlers will, hate you and say they hate you and be angry. And if you take that personally and react, punish, all these things, it's not going to be good parenting for the child. So what I learned about shame is that each child must feel that both parents love them. And that means love them unconditionally for who they are. That doesn't mean that you can break furniture, but that you accept your child for who they are. You're not trying to change them. You're not loving and accepting only when they get good grades or they lose weight or, play football or whatever it might be, that you want a relationship with them. It's not enough to say, I love you, you're the greatest, but that you're interested in them and you want to find out about them, and you accept their interests, you support what they want. And so that's showing them that they have value and that you respect that. So it's treating your child with respect and interest and care and empathy. So all those things are important. So that's what builds self-esteem. And so if you didn't get that growing up because of your parents' low self-esteem or shame, or just there were too many children, not enough money, parental conflict, a mental illness, depression, addiction, all that's going to detract from healthy parenting because your parent's going to be preoccupied. And there's even research that if a mother is depressed, the child will be codependent because a baby needs that mirroring and empathy and presence. And a mother can't give that because her own needs aren't being met. She can't transmit it. So then will lead to core symptoms and codependency of shame and low self-esteem. They go together. So those are the first two. Okay, and then it goes on to, go ahead.
I was going to ask about nurturing because you've really emphasized that is nurturing. You need nurturing from your mother. Specifically, you've mentioned that. And if you don't have enough nurturing, the result is you're going to be looking for that other places externally through codependency. Is that a theory or?
Well, it's science and researchers show that babies need responsive communication. So when the baby laughs, you smile back. When the baby is sad, you look sad, you comfort the baby. So it shows empathy, and that's called mirroring. You show the same expression, and then you meet the need. So you change the baby, you feed the baby, you hold the baby, you intuit, you're attuned to the baby's needs. So baby feels like this is heaven, it's bliss. If you don't get that, you keep looking for it, or maybe you had it. A lot of people get intermittent, and that creates addiction to love, intermittent attention. So sometimes you get it, but you're never sure when it's going to come back, like a slot machine. And then, so what happens is the baby starts scanning, instead of like laying there and thinking, oh, it feels so good inside in heaven, you're scanning the room. When is mother coming? What mood is she going to be in? Who's coming? Will I get fed or not? You don't feel safe. And so it starts this looking around the environment instead of connecting inside. And furthermore, you start to attune. Instead of the mother attuning to you, you start thinking, is she angry? What mood is she in? So a lot of times ACAs are considered hypervigilant, or if you had a parent with a personality disorder or unstable mood, the child starts to become very attuned to other people and the mood and disposition of the parent. Is it safe? Is it not safe? And so it starts that haywire system, I call it, in Codependency for Dummies, where instead of connecting to your innate needs and feelings and responses, you start looking to adapt to your partner or what someone else wants and figure it out. And how can I please them so that I will get my needs met? What mood is my wife going to be in? Or what mood is my husband in? So I'll be safe. And then I will edit what I say or do to make sure that we don't have a fight and I'm not left, or I'm not shamed or abused or ignored, all those things. And so that, again, it goes back to shame. So people pleasing is a symptom, sacrificing your needs. But if you don't know what your needs are, this ties in with denial. A big symptom is denial of the codependency, denial of feelings, denial of needs, denial of trauma, and denial of wants. So it's like, I'm a blank. I don't know what's going on in here. I'm focused on you. I think I'm going to figure out what you want, what you need, what you feel. And I'm going to analyze, what did you mean when you said that? And what do you really feel? And try to figure out that so I can get my needs met, rather than thinking, I'm tired. I think I need to rest. I'm lonely. Maybe I need to reach out to someone, or I'm angry. Do I need to set a boundary? Then we get into another problem of boundaries. So the boundaries get blurred if a mother doesn't have an intact self-esteem. As I mentioned, I was reacting to my child. So my boundaries weren't good because I was taking it all personally. There was no filter there. That's an emotional boundary. So if a mother is reacting all the time or blaming or living through her child, so a lot of narcissistic parents want to live through their child vicariously. There's no differentiation. You don't have a self. In fact, I say this in my book on narcissism. It's interesting. A lot of this, I say that narcissists are codependent too, and everything they do is a defense to shame, just about, when you look at all the symptoms. But they have poor boundaries too, but it's the reverse. Like a narcissist can only see themselves. They don't see you. You're like a two-dimensional cardboard paper doll. And a codependent doesn't see themselves. They just are looking at the narcissist and like, what does a narcissist want? What do they feel? What do they need? And try to meet those needs. So it works really well together because they both agree at an unconscious level, or maybe with narcissists it's conscious, that the narcissist comes first. They both put the needs of the narcissist first until enough time goes by, and then the codependent says, wait a minute, what about me? They may not even say, what about me? They just think I'm unhappy. They may not even realize why. They keep trying harder.
Yes.
They try harder and harder to please the narcissist, who can never be pleased because they have this bottomless pit of unfillable needs. They're empty inside. So moving on to other symptoms, shame breeds guilt. So we all have guilt, but shame often breeds irrational guilt. So I might feel guilty because you're drinking, but it has nothing to do with my behavior. So that's irrational guilt. Or there's a lot of examples, but the guilt is not rational, not tied to your behavior. It's maybe someone else is, your husband or wife comes home angry, and you think, oh, what did I do wrong? You feel guilty. You feel guilty all the time because maybe you're used to being blamed, and you shame yourself a lot. And that's another thing, is a lot of negative self-talk and self-shaming. Or in an intimate situation, Maybe your partner is saying they're sad, and right away you think, okay, start getting defensive. well, I didn't mean that. I didn't, it's not my fault that you're sad. But actually they're defending themselves. They do feel like it's their fault. What can I do to make you happy? You can't fix someone else's depression. So shame, I was saying what a painful feeling it is underneath, because you can't redeem yourself. You just feel like I'm so worthless. There's nowhere to go with that except down. So I call it falling into the well of shame when you have a shame attack. And some people live there. Other people, something could happen and they feel humiliated, embarrassed, ashamed. And it could take days, weeks, months to let it go. So you can go from guilt to depression and hopelessness, despair, and underneath all that is just emptiness. So I've covered, okay, so a couple other symptoms is control. So control and caretaking, trying to fix the other person. The caretaking of other people boosts your importance. If you don't, even if you don't love me, if you need me, then I'll feel good. I'll feel wanted if I'm needed, because I'm not sure that I'm worthy of your really being loved for who I am, but I'm going to find somebody who needs me. I'm going to try to fix you. You're going to be dependent on me. Maybe someone who has personality disorder, a narcissist, an addict, someone who's very needy. And underneath, there's a feeling of, usually unconscious, they won't leave me because they need me. Because all of this shame leads to fear of abandonment. Because if I'm not worthy of love and being liked, you're not going to stick around. And those micro incidents where a parent is not there or not mirroring, those are little emotional abandonments. So it may not seem too much, but seem like it. But when a parent isn't attuned to you, and I'll give you an example for myself. I remember I was in grade school and my best friend was climbing trees with somebody else, and I was too afraid. So I was crying and complaining to my mother, and she said, that's for the birds. When they're a little older, they won't want to climb trees. It didn't help.
It's just dismissive, kind of trying to.
Right. Yeah. So, or, a child comes and says, with shame, my friends bullied me or ignored me. And the parent says, well, don't play with them anymore, or just ignore it. Or they really envy you. So it's not mirroring the pain and the hurt and the shame that your child feels. So those are little micro emotional abandonments. So, but the biggest thing is that I'm really unwanted. So if you leave me, then I'll be all alone, and then I'll feel all this shame, worthlessness, alienation. A lot of times when codependents break up or have a relationship that ends, they compound their pain by feeling like letting it affect their self-esteem. It's because I'm unworthy. I wasn't lovable enough. What did I do wrong? It was my fault. And they just make, normal grief into misery and suffering. So I mentioned caretaking, control also. So, for instance, a narcissist uses control more than caretaking. And by the way, just add that the caretaker will often sacrifice their needs because A, they don't know what their needs are, and B, because they want the other person to need them, and they put the other person first because they think they'll get their needs met indirectly that way, but it never works. And if you're with someone who's An abuser, what it does is you're teaching them to take advantage of you more and more and more. And you feel worse and worse, and you don't know why, because I'm trying so hard to meet all your needs and please you. But people will treat you the way you teach them to treat you. So control, on the other hand, it's another way of, so caretaking is kind of a way of control to try to fix people, give them advice, tell them what to do, shape them up, or just order them around, and shame them, criticize them. So control is a way to deal with these feelings of insecurity. So if I control you, and if I have power over you, you won't leave. And I can try to make you feel good, so I'll feel good. It all comes back to focusing on changing, controlling, pleasing, caretaking someone else, so I'll feel better. And the healing for codependency is to turn that 180 degrees around. And this is the hard part. You mentioned nurturing. If you weren't nurtured, it's hard to know how to nurture yourself. And it's a lot more involved than just getting massages or bubble baths. You have to start listening to yourself. And on my website, whatiscodependency.com, I have a banner of like how to heal for codependency. And I talk about self-love is the key to recovery. And you have to acknowledge your feelings, identify them, honor them, and then figure out what you need and meet those needs. So a lot of people, because of the denial I mentioned, aren't aware or can't name their feelings. So that's the first step. And research has shown if you name your feeling, it helps to reduce the negative impact of it. And that can be coupled with naming yourself. So if I were to say, Darlene, you're feeling sad, I'm parenting myself. So you can say it to yourself or out loud, but you're identifying it, you're mirroring it just like a good parent would. And then trying to figure out, what do I need? And that's could be a leap. That could be really hard. And there's such a thing as shame bonding. So certain feelings, needs, activities, or interests could be shame bonded. Like if you got a lot of shame about your weight, so eating or dieting, your appearance becomes shame bonded. If you were shamed, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about, then your distress is shamed. If you are punished for speaking up or showing anger, then your anger is shame bonded. So those feelings can get, and needs can get repressed. So you don't even know what they are. Because why feel it if you're just going to experience shame? Be either directly or by being ignored or put down in some way, or just it not being met. So that's how sometimes feelings and needs can go underground. And even the feeling of wanting love, if you were turned away, then that can be shame bonded. So it could feel very humiliating for someone to ask for a hug, to ask for their needs to be met. So it's not just being able to identify the feelings, identify the needs, but then to be able to have the words and the courage to ask for that. So that comes into communication, which is the next symptom: dysfunctional communication, dysfunctional boundaries, dysfunctional communication. And if you don't know what you're feeling, you can't be assertive. And most codependents come from families where parents were either passive or aggressive, or passive aggressive, or they were both aggressive. So there was not healthy modeling of assertiveness, maybe a lot of conflict, maybe they're afraid of conflict, or they don't want to be like a parent that was abusive or raging. or their anger got punished. So a lot of different ways, or they're modeling after they had one parent that was abusive and the other was passive. So they learning how to cope with an abuse as you become passive. You don't set boundaries. So by modeling. So in order to have intimacy, you have to be able to speak up. You have to have two people that acknowledge who they are and what they feel, what they want, what they need, and say it out loud, have the courage. You have to have the courage to face it in yourself, and then you have to have the courage to express it. And it could be very scary. So the good thing about therapy is hopefully you can start to do that with your therapist in a safe environment and then practice it and then take it out into the world. So that's, I think I've covered the main, dependency also. I didn't mention that. So dependency, I'm not sure that that comes from shame, but that's a symptom of codependency, the dependency on someone else. Maybe you had a parent that restricted your autonomy and shamed your choices. So you feel insecure about making decisions, and you're afraid of making mistakes. So their shame could lead to dependency too. You don't trust, I guess it does, because you don't trust yourself. So you're asking everybody's opinion, or you're doing what someone else said to do. And it's hard for codependents to have agency, to do things on their own, to take initiative. They do great, maybe on a job or with a partner, in a classroom, in a bureaucracy. They follow orders well, but if left to their own, they usually don't know what they want. They can't get themselves, I say in the Dummies book, you lost your mojo.
Yeah.
So they're just like, I don't know, I can't motivate myself. But you give them an assignment and they do it right away. So there's dependency too, and the lack of autonomy. And you need autonomy, which is the reverse, for intimacy. So a lot of times relationships with codependence start with an insecure attachment style from the parenting that I said initially, and then they end up in a relationship where someone is distant, avoidant, and they're pursuing, or they might switch roles and with someone else and do the reverse. So they're always like, switching who's the pursuer, who's the distancer, and they never really stand still and face each other and do exactly what I said, to say how they feel, what they need, what they want, and have the courage to do that, be intimate. It's always about arguing about the relationship and whose fault it is. And it's how shame becomes the most silent killer.
Yeah. I mean, this is so helpful on how you're framing it so someone can kind of do some introspection. One of the things I feel like clients that I've worked with is they don't understand control as it relates to codependency. Like they're like, I'm not controlling, or they're the controlling one. How does control look for a codependent?
Well, it could be passive, covert kind of control. So if you're getting gifts for someone, for instance, you're trying to please them. In a way, you're trying to control how they're going to feel, what they're, and then you're advising them, trying to help them, enabling them, for instance, with an addict, which is typical. So you're trying to get them to stop using or drinking or whatever, or get them to stop overeating or whatever. You're telling them what to do. So that's controlling, right?
Those are great examples just for somebody listening that's like, well, I don't think I'm controlling. It's like, well, we all have to evaluate what areas in our lives we're trying to control. I think it's such an important self-reflection.
Perfectionism too. That's a symptom. It's not everybody's perfectionist, but a lot of codependents are. So I wrote a book on how to overcome perfectionism. But perfectionism is a defense to shame. So if I'm perfect, no one can criticize me. I can't, if I make any mistakes, it's like the whole house of cards will fall down. So there's shame underneath that.
It seems like when codependency it's this, for some people, it feels insurmountable. They're like, how am I ever going to work through this? Like, how am I ever going to heal this? Because they will literally come in and tell me what their partner feels. And then like, okay, what do you feel? And it's retraining like the neural network. It's healing that shame so you can access your own, like you said, emotions.
Mm.
And how important is it to have support? Like, we have Codependence Anonymous and support groups. How important do you feel that is to recovery?
Oh, I think it's very important because, first of all, if you're in therapy, if you're not in analysis, you're in therapy once a week. That's 1 hour out of 7 days. And this is changing your whole mindset, learning new habits, learning new skills. And so going to a meeting, you're going to hear other people's stories to inspire you. But the most important thing is you're going to hear people that have gone through the same thing. So it lessens the amount of shame that you have about yourself. So you realize, oh, I'm not the only one who has these problems. There are other people too, and you can learn from them. And then you can call people like round the clock, pretty much in any time zone for support. So it minimizes the amount of shame, because shame wants you to withdraw and hide, as I said, disappear. And you want to do the opposite. You want to connect. So when you feel hurt or resentful disappointment with your partner, typically a codependent will want to withdraw. Well, there's someone that's going to get angry and rage, because there's all different types of codependence. And there's the typical codependent, though, will like withdraw and keep it to themselves and maybe pout or maybe be passive aggressive and forget something, or just not want intercourse or whatever. But to be able to do the opposite and tell your partner, this really hurt me, means being vulnerable. That's the opposite of shame, being authentic. So, starting to journal, write about these experiences, see where you're authentic, where you're not authentic, and if not, why, what you're afraid of, and what would the alternative look like. And I always tell people, it begins within. So how do you talk to yourself? Write down all your negative self-talk, including the shooting on yourself. So,
Because those are the tells when you're in shame. I think shooting is a huge one. So, where could people find you if they're interested in your work? Where could people find you if they're like, I love what Darlene said? Right. Where can people find you?
So whatiscodependency.com. And if you Google my name, I'm on all social media, and there's links to everything, my blogs, my YouTube channel, everything on my website. And I have books on Amazon and also on my website that people can get.
And I'll link everything in the show notes as well, and join the newsletter if you're not on it. And I send the links out there, and then head over to the links and buy Darlene's books. They're amazing and they're so helpful. Thank you, Darlene, for the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you
I'm
so much.
grateful for you.
I appreciate
it so much.
Yeah.